Welcome to Improve Your English Writing video number 28, which will cover the comma, and it's part 1 of 5. The subjects I'll cover will be basically a conjunction separating two independent clauses, an introductory subordinate clause or verbal phrase, an introductory prepositional phrase, which is rule number 5, an introductory conjunctive, adverb, transitional expression, or parenthetical expression, which is rule number 6. So if you'd like to get notifications for this series, please click subscribe. If you like the video or think others will find it useful, please click like. And check out links to books and videos in the description, like a link to the companion volume right here. So let's get to it. So part 1 of the comma and rule number 3. Use a comma to separate two independent clauses that are joined with a coordinating conjunction. So we have independent clauses are in green, the coordinating conjunction is in blue. I went to the grocery store, I saw a friend from high school. These are two independent clauses. You have them joined with a coordinating conjunction and so what you do is you need to separate them with a comma. So this is how you write that. Two independent clauses, coordinating conjunction, you separate it with a comma. Another example is, once again, the green are two independent clauses, and then you have the conjunction here, coordinating conjunction here, and then to separate the two, you put in a comma. So my investigation notes start on page 21, comma, but my analysis of the accident's cause begins on page 53. Once again, two independent clauses joined by a coordinating conjunction, you need to put a comma. If the clauses are very short, like 4 or fewer words, and no misreading is likely, those are the two conditions, very short and no misreading is likely, the comma may, you don't have to, but may be omitted. For example, I felt ill and my friend left. Perfectly fine. You can actually put a comma right here, just like the right after ill. It'd be perfectly fine. But since it's short and no misreading is likely, you may actually omit the comma. So rule number 4, use a comma to separate an introductory subordinate clause or an introductory verbal phrase from an independent clause. So once again, the introductory clauses or phrase will be in green. The independent clause will be in blue. So do an example of a subordinate clause. So before I took my summer vacation is an introductory subordinate clause. And then you have an independent clause. I broke my thumb. You use a comma here. So introductory subordinate clause from an independent clause, use a comma. Once again, you have the introductory subordinate clause from a independent clause, so use a comma between them. If you finish early, comma, you should work on the next case file. Now a verbal phrase, so once again, it's an introductory verbal phrase from an independent clause. So you have the introductory verbal phrase here, and you have the independent clause in blue, and you separate them. Since it's an introductory verbal phrase, you separate it with a comma. Determined to pass the typing test. So it starts with a verbal phrase, comma, the job candidate planned many hours of practice. And then one last one. So once again, you have the introductory verbal phrase, and then you have the following independent clause. You separate them with a comma. Shopping for clothes during lunch, comma, I ran into my previous boss. Let's go to rule number 5. Use a comma to separate an introductory prepositional phrase from an independent clause. So you have the introductory prepositional phrase in green, you have the independent clause in blue, and you separate them with a comma. Whoops, I've been highlighting the commas red, missed it there. In the late evening, comma, We saw Mr. Smith at the bank. Another example. So you have an introductory prepositional phrase. Upon reaching California, comma, Nancy stopped for lunch. So this is an independent clause. The comma may, you don't have to, but it may be omitted for a two-word phrase that does not reduce clarity. So it needs to be a two-word phrase, and you can't sacrifice clarity, or it can't be unclear. So for example, you could write, per rule number 5, you'd write, in 1884, comma, tornado deaths dropped by 5%. But since you have a two-word phrase and omitting the comma won't reduce the clarity, or make the sentence unclear, you can omit the comma. So you can write it this way: in 1884, tornado deaths dropped by 5%. But here's some examples of where a comma is needed due to clarity. In May, April, we'll just assume that's a lady's name. In May, April will graduate from college. Now you can imagine if you didn't have the comma here, this may be confusing. In May, April. It may become confusing what's going on here. So the comma is needed for clarity. So even though it's a two-word phrase, you can't omit the comma because the sentence may be confusing. Another example is when you have numbers adjacent to each other. In 1884, 142 people died from tornadoes. So if you didn't have this comma here, these two numbers adjacent to each other may lead to confusion. And actually, this is rule number 87. I would put the video number, but I haven't planned my videos out that long. But video number 87 may be like video 60 or something like that. Who knows? But basically, look up rule 87, and I'll be covering this situation actually maybe in greater detail in that video. But basically here, the comma is needed for clarity. So in rule number 6, use a comma to separate an introductory conjunctive adverb, transitional expression, or parenthetical expression from an independent clause. However, do not place a comma after the conjunctive adverbs hence, then, thus, so, and yet. So if you've noticed the theme of the last few rules, it's all these introductory things get a comma. So here now we put a comma to separate introductory conjunctive adverb, transitional expression, and parenthetical expressions. So I heard the scream. However, this is a conjunctive adverb, an introductory conjunctive adverb. So then you have a independent clause after it. So yeah, you need a comma between them. Introductory conjunctive adverb, comma, independent clause. So I heard a scream. However, comma, I did not call the police. Next example is, once again, you have a conjunctive adverb, but from this list, these 5 conjunctive adverbs do not get a comma. So you say, I heard the scream, thus I called the police. Normally you would put a comma here, but these 5 conjunctive adverbs do not get a comma. And next we have an example of a transitional expression. So you have an introductory transitional expression in the green, comma, followed by a independent clause. So I took the medicine. As a result, comma, I fell asleep quickly. The last one is a introductory parenthetical expression. So parenthetical expression is in green, and the independent clause is in blue. And since you have an introductory parenthetical expression, you use a comma to separate it from the independent clause. So you say, in my opinion, comma, he stole the jewelry. And then just some finer points of, I call introductory, call these parenthetical expressions. So when yes, no, okay, or well begin a sentence, separate it with a comma because the word is being used as a parenthetical expression. So an introductory, because it says it begins a sentence, it's basically an introductory. If these words begin a sentence, it's basically a parenthetical expression, therefore use a comma. For example, yes, I'm a doctor. Remember, a parenthetical expression can be removed from the sentence without affecting the meaning. If you just had the sentence, I'm a doctor, it could be fine with you could remove the word yes and the sentence would be perfectly fine. So introductory, yes, you just separate with a comma. Yes, I am a doctor. The example is an introductory, okay. Okay, let's begin the lecture. Remember, the sentence could just be, let's begin the lecture. It's just a parenthetical expression, or okay, it's just a parenthetical expression. I was asked if I'm a doctor. Well, I am. So you can actually remember, you can actually remove well and have perfectly good sentence. I was asked if I'm a doctor. I am. See, well doesn't do anything. It's just a parenthetical expression. Therefore, when it begins a sentence, just separate it with a comma. And then the finer nuance point, when now or then begins a sentence and has the meaning of well, which we know to be a parenthetical expression, separate it with a comma, just like we did above. But if now or then relate to time or sequence, do not separate it with a comma. So some examples. Now, that is a point well taken. This use of now here is just being used. We could actually replace it with well. Well, that is a point well taken. So here now is being used to mean well, or has the same basic meaning. If you can substitute in there, then it's a parenthetical expression. The next example is not. Sam went to the grocery store, then he got gas. Then is being used in relationship to time or sequence, because he went here then, so it's sequence. Since then is being used in relationship to time or sequence, do not use a comma. So that's it for this video. If you like to get notifications for this series, please click subscribe. If you like the video, please hit like, and check out links to books and videos in the description. Thank you.